Authors Over 50, Writing in Life's Sweetest Third. Authors Over 50's weekly podcast celebrates writers and their journeys to publication. Writing after 50 is a whole story on its own, so let's skip to life's sweetest third and talk with authors about their journey from pen to publish. Welcome, I'm Julia Daly, your host, and I invite you to listen to interviews with writers who've achieved their goal of publishing a book just later in life. We've seen award lists for under 30 or under 40, but I've yet to see lists for those who've achieved a significant milestone of their own, launching a new career and publishing their first book after the age of 50. We will hear about these authors' inspirations, struggles, strategies, and the smell of that first book. These writers' journeys inspire me because I'm one of them. My guest today is a first-generation college graduate from UNC Greensboro and previously served on the advisory board for their Bryan School of Business. A licensed CPA, Dave started his business career in an entry-level accounting position before advancing to first CFO, then CEO of Performance Bike, for a time the largest cycling retailer in the United States. He retired from corporate America and began writing Relative Distance. His early life as an abused child taught him how to overcome difficult obstacles, and his successful career as a senior executive in business taught him to lead and communicate effectively as a writer and speaker. He has a passion and ability to not only tell his story, but to help adults, young and old, who were abused as children, to live the lives they want, not the ones forced on them. Welcome to Authors Over 50, David Pruitt.
Thank you, Julia. I appreciate you having me. It's good to be here.
David, our opening question on Authors Over 50 is always, so what took you so long to write a book?
And I'm sure the answer that you get quite often is I have two sons, wonderful sons who I'm very proud of. I was raising them and building my career, as you just spoke of. And, once I had retired, I think, it's a big moment in your life. And when you have that kind of dramatic change, it was an opportunity for me to kind of reflect back and think about the journey. And I have two older brothers, and they were very affected by what happened to us growing up. And I realized on my journey that I had been affected too. And so I began writing scenes, and I had lost one of my brothers for 27 years. And I found him when I retired. And when I went to find him, I obviously wanted to know how he had been doing. And he's a wonderful guy, and I'm so proud of him today. But he had been homeless for a significant part of the time that we were apart. And so he told me about how that time earlier when we grew up had impacted him. I knew how it had impacted me. I began researching something called adverse childhood experiences. And I realized how many people in the U.S., adults who have issues as children that they really don't talk about. And so all those things together drove me to write this book. And yes, what took so much time is my kids were my first priority. My career was important, and I had responsibility.
Well, David, I'm always interested in how some people can break the chain or cycle of what was modeled for them as a child, and how some cannot and continue the cycle. What do you think was it that motivated you to create a better life for yourself than the one you experienced as a child?
Well, I think I benefited from being the youngest child. Again, my brothers are wonderful guys, and they're doing great. And I love them so much for allowing me to tell their story too. But being the youngest child, I saw the road that they were going down due to the way we had been raised. And when I saw that, it gave me the opportunity, and it's really difficult to try to break out of that because you have self-esteem issues, right? And but it gave me something I saw that I didn't want to happen to me. And so, but it was very scary. No one in my family had ever been to college. It wasn't even talked about. So to go and try to go to college and CPA, and particularly when I started taking leadership roles in corporate America. When I first started my corporate career, I had trouble speaking in groups. I mean, I just didn't have any confidence. But I think being the youngest child really made a big difference for me, and I was blessed to be in that position. And then from there, when you go out and try things and you have a little bit of success, the more success you have, it builds on itself, and it's kind of an iterative process. And so I have a little success, you get a little bit more confidence, you step out there a little bit more. And, I think that's what's happened to me. My concern is that just so many of these kids now who, they're having their potential stolen as we speak. And so I wanted to tell this story to show them a path, and not just my path, but my brother's path, which was very different, but still ultimately successful. And so that's really what it's all about. And I'm on the journey.
Well, we thank you so much for being so honest and for sharing your story, because there are so many people who have led this same life as you, and they need to hear your inspiration to maybe help them along their journey.
Well, I appreciate that. All proceeds from this book are going to go to organizations like Protect childhelp.com, PCA, Prevent Child Abuse, which is a nationwide organization. I'm not in this for anything. I'm blessed to have had the life that I've had, and I'm in a position where I have time and energy to try to give something back. So that's really what I'm doing. And it was such an educational process for me, because I didn't know there was a name for what happened to us, right? And so I've not only wrote this book, which I took a great deal of care to do, I've also had an opportunity to learn about how prevalent it is. And these adverse childhood experiences, there's 10 events that can happen to a child before they're the age of 17 that can change the course of their life. Wow. So, and the more events that happen to them, then it leads to 400% greater chance for depression, 1,200% greater chance for suicide. If you have like 6 of these 10 events, in general, your lifespan, according to the CDC, is 20 years less than for your ethnicity and gender. Wow. So it's just an incredible thing. I'm very proud of what I wrote. I got a favorable review from Publishers Weekly, which is not an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
And I'm very proud of that. But I say that because I think I wrote a good story beyond just trying to deliver my message. I'm hoping that the reader will be carried along, and I think that would be the case.
I agree. And I think having that book as now your calling card will open a lot of doors for you to help even more people.
I hope so. I'm trying to make connections, and I'm one guy, but you got to take your shot and do your best, and that's what I'm going to do. So.
Well, once you decided to write this book and started getting it on paper, then how did you proceed? Did you search for an agent, decide to choose a hybrid? Did you go with a small press, or did you self-publish?
Well, I'm sure a lot of people do. I had a really interesting journey. So what I did, I wrote the manuscript, and there's something you may be familiar with it. It's a workshop called Aspen Words. It's a really, I guess, relatively prestigious. I don't know the right word. Anyway, I sent my manuscript to them. I didn't think anything would come of it, but they accepted it. And it's a 3-day workshop. And I ran into an author there. You've probably heard of Margot Shetterly, who wrote Hidden Figures. Her husband, Aaron, who's a wonderful guy, he's a writer as well. He's got 2 books out, and they're wonderful. Anyway, he was running this workshop, and he accepted my manuscript, and he really loved it. And he tried to introduce me to New York agents, and I actually got him a look at that, but I got the whole platform question, right? How many Instagram followers, how many TikTok, all that. And they liked the manuscript, but I'm a 61-year-old guy who has no social media presence. So, I couldn't make a go of that, but I found a company. It was a hybrid. She formerly worked in traditional publishing. Her acceptance rate was like 5%. And she accepted my manuscript, and then I published from there. And not so far after that, I got the Publishers Weekly review, which was huge, and it's kind of opened up a few doors for me. So it's been it's a winding journey, and I would tell any author who's looking at this, it's a crowded marketplace. It's a challenging marketplace, but start with writing your book and writing something that you're passionate about. And then, it's up to you in terms of your energy and your drive.
What is your writing routine? Are you a morning person or a night person?
I found I love to write. I told my college roommate when I was 20 years old, I'd just gotten out of my home that I'd had all the struggles in, and I was working factory jobs to be able to live on campus. And I told him I was going to write a book. I had no idea that this was going to be the book. I thought it would be something a little bit lighter. But when I was writing this book, and it took me a couple of years, I would have certain days of the week when I would go to the local library in silence, and I would get there, I'd have a good breakfast, and I would write all day. And I did that for, I'd probably do that 3 or 4 days a week, and until I was done. And then I gave my manuscript to friends that I trusted, and they gave me their feedback, and then I'd go and write some more. So for me, it was once I started, I was passionate about it, and I stayed with it. And now I'm writing some articles for different sites and everything, and I do that when I have a topic that I want to write about.
Well, what does the title mean? Relative distance.
It's about the journey of life. I know that's heavy, but let me explain. We're all born, and there's going to be an end for all of us, and it's a journey, and we're all trying to get to that place where we find our sense of purpose, our sense of fulfillment, the place in life we're supposed to be. That we have people around us that love us, and we love them. But for an abused child, that journey is a little bit longer and tougher. So that's what the title of relative distance is referring to. Getting there, but how, we're not all starting from the same place. If someone's running a 5K, if they're running up a mountainside and it's 3,000 feet of elevation, that's very different than running down Ocean Boulevard with the ocean breeze behind you. It's just, so it's relative distance. That's it. That's where it came from.
Well, in your case, it could really have a double meaning. You could be putting distance between you and your relatives, or you could have a biking distance. There could be a lot of different meanings to that title.
Yeah, well, that was it. I love my father. I love my parents. It was tough. My mother was mentally ill and schizophrenic. She was gone by the time I was 10 years old. And my dad, for his various challenges, he took care of us, and I understand that. I mean, in terms of roof over our head and food in our stomach. So I'm not oblivious to that. It's just the things that happened, it did some damage.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, why don't you tell us a little bit more about the book, and then read a few paragraphs so that we can hear your tone and voice in the book.
Okay. So the book, the theme of the book is the journey beyond a dysfunctional upbringing. And I guess so my story in terms of first generation and corporate America, CEO, whatever, all that stuff. And my brother, I had 2 older brothers, and when I was 18 years old, they were both homeless on the streets of Greensboro, North Carolina, which is where I grew up. I got kicked out when I was 18, and I thought I was going to be homeless. So I had played some sports. I had some friends that took me in briefly while I figured it out. I ultimately got back in with my dad enough to be able to have a roof over my head to go to school. But the passage I'm going to read to you from my book is the opening 2 pages, and I'll set the scene. This is the scene of one of my brothers who I love dearly, and where he was at in that moment when I was 18. The name of the chapter is The Park. Why a seemingly merciless God decided it was his fate to be born into a damaged home is a fair question to ask, though not one with an easy answer. He could have been born into the historic mansions of old Irving Park with their rolling hills and emerald putting greens, or the fresh money estates of new Irving Park with their impeccable red bricked homes backed by placid clear waters and fronted by wrought iron gates. These are the places of privilege in Greensboro, North Carolina in 1979. It could have happened that way, but it didn't. That the fates have been unkind to him is beyond dispute. That he's been hurt by people he loved and trusted is fact. that he, without early expectation or intent, has lied, stolen, and disappointed those who loved him is an unfortunate truth. And now he's here in this pivotal moment, these most uncertain of times, on a warm Sunday evening, alone in a local park with a small name, Country Park. He hikes the lengthy trails in tepid silence, and despite his troubles, can't help but notice the beauty of his surroundings, the white oak and sugar maple leaves that dance beneath the clouds, the dogwoods in bloom, stray berries resting above shallow roots, twin lakes nestled amid verdant woods, casting a long shadow that cools the paired-off lovers as they lie in repose, gazing at one another on their rumpled blankets along the grassy shorelines. With tired feet and a weary glance, he finds an empty park bench overlooking a lake. Taking a seat, he drops his backpack on the thin pine straw at his feet, looks out and spots a young boy fishing, his willowy line hanging from a thin bamboo pole with a half-red, half-white sinker floating aimlessly atop the tranquil pond. He stares at its slow, hypnotic drift and remembers a time not so long ago when he eagerly cast his line in these waters. There were fish he caught and some that got away. Brown-haired, sunburnt, and long-limbed at 20 years of age, he stands taller than most and is lean and sinewy in a manner that prompts notice from the occasional passerby. His hands are strong and capable, lending him to excel at challenging physical work. He may not design the building, but he can align the studs and straight cut the 2x4s. And despite his occasional struggle with the truth at his core, he's a decent soul and possesses a discreet but present charisma. There's real good in him, and some can see it. But somehow, in the recesses of his anxious mind, any faith about what he can accomplish in this life has long been stripped away. In the lonely quiet, he ponders the last few difficult months while the darkness continues its rapid descent. He was ordered to leave his home and not come back, and not without reason. He made mistakes and did things that were just plain wrong. It's also true that he was raised by a man who survived hard things as a youth and zealously passed them on, as if he was supposed to, as if it was all he knew, as if it was the right thing, as if it was the only way. Well, maybe it was, and maybe his leaving was for the best.
That is so descriptive and so poignant.
Well, thank you. Thank you. So, yeah, when I started writing, it was just, and I'm sure that happens for a lot of writers, it started as a brain dump, right? And I wrote so many words for all this stuff. And as the more I wrote, the more comfortable I got at doing it. And really, I could center on what I really wanted to say and try to put the reader there. So I sort of acquired skills as part of the process of figuring out where I was really going to go with it, if that makes sense.
It does. And how long do you think it took you to write this book?
Well, I would say 2 years, but I had probably within 6 months, I had this thing that was not good enough, right? And then it was sort of going back, and I got better. I learned some things about memoir writing that were important, like universal takeaway. People don't know me, right? And they don't know my siblings, again, who I love dearly, but when they read a book, they need to be able to take away something from themselves, something that they can take into themselves that makes them a better person or a wiser person, and then so that became the goal. So I became more comfortable as I wrote, trying to share more of my thoughts about life and how to get to a better place in life. So yes, it took me a couple of years, but I feel like it was a great process. I was a better writer 2 years later than when I started.
Well, what do you think your brothers feel about this book? A lot of times when we write memoir, our families have a lot to say about it. Was there anything that they didn't want you to put in the book? Was there something that you had to edit out of the book?
One or two things, but nothing integral to the story and what we were trying to tell. I was very open with them and what I was trying to do. I love my brothers dearly. I would never do anything that they weren't comfortable with. But it's a hard story. It's a hard story, and it was hard for me, and I know it's hard for them. So I'm doing. They were so kind to let me do it and support me in the process, and I want to praise them. I tell my brother's story who was homeless for 20 years. And I see his story as the most heroic story in the book. So, yeah, for him to overcome it was pretty amazing. So, yeah, so they a few things were edited out, but nothing that affected the story. And I will say to the reader, I think, and I've gotten some reviews that suggest that it's not just me saying this. There's some challenging stuff in my book because it's a challenging topic. But there's a bit of, if you think about the book, there's a little bit of a descent early as you kind of learn what happened. But there's definitely an ascent in the second half of the book that I think will take the reader on a journey that, that they'll enjoy. But there's some tough scenes. I can't deny that. But I had to be real about it.
Well, and that's your truth. And you have to tell your truth. Even growing up in the same house with two other siblings, we all have different memories. And I have to tell my truth as I remember it, even though their perspectives may be entirely different on the exact same subject.
Well, so my oldest brother, who's again a great guy, I showed him the manuscript and I said, "Hey, you've got to tell me here. Am I saying something wrong? Was it as bad as I remember?" And my older brother, who doesn't have a lot of words sometimes, but he simply looked at me and said it was worse. So, so I don't feel that I've misstated anything at all. I was very careful about that. You don't remember, and we know this as authors, and the reader knows that you don't remember conversations exactly as they took. You don't. And the reader knows that, and I have the proper disclaimer or whatever, as all authors do in their book. But yeah, the guts of what happened are there, and the moment was there. When I was reading you the earlier about my brother in this park, and what really happened later is the cops came by at 3 o'clock in the morning, and he knew the policeman who tried to run him out of the park. They went to high school together. And so, but in that moment that was happening, that next day I was having a conversation with my father about asking for help for college. Again, no one had gone, and it didn't go well. And I got kicked out. And I don't remember that conversation word for word, but I tried to give it the best way I remembered it. And that's what it's about, So yes, telling the story.
Yes, and that story is going to touch so many lives. And, it's not worth what you went through, but it's going to help so many people to share what you went through.
Yeah, I didn't write it for pity for me or my brothers. Not at all. Not at all. I know a lot of people go through this, and I just want to tell a story about moving beyond it. But you got to tell what you're moving beyond, right? I mean, you have to set the stage. So anyway, I'm excited about this, and I'm thankful and grateful for my life. And this is my moment to try to tell a story that'll help some people. That's all I really want to do.
Well, what do you think was the best money you've ever spent as a writer?
Well, Julia, it's interesting. The bicycle industry is not the most profitable industry, which I was the CEO of. I worked at a bicycle company for 27 years, and we grew it from 10 stores to well over 100, and from 30 million in revenue to 250 million in revenue. And so that's a hard industry. And I found that the publishing industry is a really tough industry too. So it's just, as you know, there's 1 million books published a year. I think like 10,000 get reviewed on Publishers Weekly. It's a 1 in 1,000 shot and an agent. And, I would probably say, my publishing experience has been good. So the hybrid model of sharing that cost, I've done that. And it's a good investment because I understand, having worked in business all those years, the importance of a good product, right? And so the book must be good. And they helped me on that journey. So that was a good investment for me.
Do you have another book in you?
I'm thinking about it. I'm putting all my energy into, telling this story and trying to drive it as much as possible so I can create some meaningful dollars that can provide some help. That's really my energy. But I have a story in my mind. Real quickly, I have a group of friends. My friends became my family. So I've been friends with them for 50 years. And we're very different, and our paths have all been very different. There's been some tremendous success stories. There's been some challenges in terms of health. Uh, yeah, there's a multiracial aspect to it with a perspective on issues of today. And they're really great guys. Yeah, so if I ever, yeah, if I do one, that might be one, because number one, there aren't too many 40 or 50-year friendships, right? And yeah, number two, I think that'd be there's some really interesting stories to tell. I mean, when we were in college together, who would have thought our paths would have gone, right? Anyone can say that, right? With your group of friends. And yeah, I had a great friend who died young with some brain issues. And it was just unbelievable. Yeah, I can still remember him today. I have another friend who's done incredibly well in banking, right? I have another friend who's had some health issues with vision. But they're all great people, tremendous, personable, good human beings. And they meant a lot to me on my journey. So, and I think they may have an interesting story to tell. We'll see if that comes to pass. I really do enjoy writing. I'm amazed at how much I enjoy it, but we'll see. Time will tell.
Well, it will become your next career, as it probably already has, but you'll figure out that those of us who started working early and enjoyed working will never quit. They say baby boomers will never quit working. So you've probably got several more books in you. And I think being the first generation college graduate in your family, that's going to inspire a lot of people who are just like you, who've never had college graduates and their families.
Well, I hope so. I'm so grateful for my journey. I didn't expect it. If you read the book, you know where I started. It was it's really unbelievable. So I'm really, I'm grateful for that. The journey's still going on, and hopefully I can get this book out there, and to whoever. And yeah, my wife, who's definitely my better half. As I was writing this, there's so many emotions when you're writing a book. You tell yourself, well, is anything ever going to come of this? Should I continue with this journey? I'm crazy. What am I doing? I could be out, riding my bike, which I love to do, or whatever else. But so I looked at her one day and I was like, what am I doing? Is anything going to come of this? And she looked at me and said, if 10 people were helped by your story, would it be worth it? Then the answer is yes. Mm-hmm. So it's been great. I'm proud of what I've written. I've gotten some reviews that I'm very proud of. So we'll see what happens with it.
Well, I love to ride my bike, and that's how I read now. I listen to audiobooks. I don't have time to sit and read. So when I get on that bike, even though it's an electric bike, my husband makes fun of that like it's a motorcycle. And I tell him, no, I still have to pedal, but it just helps me go up these hills in the hill country.
But that's great. I used to sell electric bikes. I'm a road bike rider myself. There's mountain biking. The e-bikes are awesome, really. And it's just a small note. E-bikes are huge in Europe. I used to go to conferences in Germany, and they're huge because the cycling infrastructure in Europe is better. There's safer places to ride, right? Yeah. But I've ridden those just for the fun of riding them, and they are just great because, you need a little boost. It's a wonderful thing.
Well, I think at my age, I do need a little boost because the hills in the hill country of Texas are pretty steep.
Well, when you ride, do you ride? Is it for recreation? Is it for stress release? I mean, what do you get from cycling?
Well, I don't know if there really is such a thing as writer's block, but when I'm writing and I can't figure out a scene, then I go out and I get on that bike. And by the time I listen to somebody else's words in my head for an audiobook, because I like thrillers, it will trigger a childhood memory, or something will pop into my brain that I need for that passage that I'm working on. It's amazing how exercising, I think, really triggers some thoughts in our brains. And so I do it for exercise. I do it for clearing my head, and for hearing other people's words, because there's so many beautiful books out there and they just inspire all of us.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I ride for one of the things that sometimes a byproduct of a dysfunctional upbringing is anxiety.
Yeah.
And so I find it to be a great stress relief just to go out there and, go 100% and really push myself. And then by the time I'm done with that, I'm not worried about anything other than sitting down and taking a break. So yeah, it's a great stress reliever for me, and I just enjoy doing it. I'm glad you do too.
Yeah, I think those endorphins in our brains really start kicking up after we've ridden our bikes.
I think so.
Dave, our last interview question is always, our riders over 50 are a unique set. Do you have any advice for riders 50 and above?
Okay. So a couple of things. The first thing is it's not the fun part of the journey, but I would gain an understanding of the publishing industry itself and go into it with your eyes wide open about what you want to achieve. And if you do go the agent route, it's a very difficult route, but be finished with your book before you start that part of your journey. I would say that. And the obvious common sense thing is write something that you have passion about, because that's probably where you're going to get your best work when you have that passion. Other than that, put a good message in the world.
Well, I think that's great advice, and I'm just so excited for you to be with us today. And now we can say that you're one of our authors over 50.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you for joining us today. Please look for Authors Over 50 every Thursday, when we will have conversations with accomplished debut novelists over the age of 50. Please subscribe and share with a friend, and check out my own publication journey after 50 at www.juliadaily, that's DAILY, like dailynewspaper.com. Until next time, keep reading and writing, and remember, it's never too late to fulfill a dream in life's sweetest third.